The realists will acknowledge advantage as a motive. Honor they shy away from. But if you're asking, why did the Athenians row 800 nautical miles? Think about rowing 800 miles. There are a lot of people in Britain that know something about rowing, but rowing 800 nautical miles, even with the help of a sail, a kind of square sail that sometimes you can deploy because the wind is in your favor, and trying to project power over that distance. The attraction for the Athenians is how crazy it is.
Hello. In 415 BC, the Athenian Empire, during a lull in the Peloponnesian War against the Spartans, voted to embark on a massive campaign to capture Syracuse. So began the Sicilian Expedition, which soon became a proxy war between Sparta and Athens, as the Spartans dispatched just one man, the great general Gylippus, to assist the Syracusans. The war had been underway since 431 BC and would last until 404 BC, and end in total defeat for Athens with the loss of its empire. Joining today is Paul Rahe, a highly distinguished ancient historian, in the first of a two-part discussion. Coming up on Wednesday, he discusses contemporary events and how his understanding of the Peloponnesian War seeks to help policymakers in the United States as its supremacy is challenged by China. Please do share the podcast with the like-minded. As ever, you can get in touch through Spotify comments or email history@aspectsofhistory.com. I have plenty of great history on the way, including the Vietnam War, the Duchess of Windsor, the Wars of the Roses, the Nazi Mind, and the Nazis and the German royal family. So please do subscribe, follow, or share. But in the meantime, it's me talking with Paul Rahe on Athens, Sparta, and the Sicilian Expedition. Paul, this is a great pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much.
I'm delighted to be here.
Well, and I was just saying before we're recording, for the benefit of listeners, I'm delighted to come across your books and your work, because this is a period of history that I think many more people should know about. That's one of the reasons why this podcast exists, and particularly to try and encourage the purchase of books as well. So, and so listeners, we're going to be talking now. I want to get onto this. This is probably my early question, but we're in the 5th century BC. We're looking at Athens and Sparta, and I was about to start calling what we're talking about today the Peloponnesian War. And I think really you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're almost turning away from that and dividing the series of conflicts between Athens and Sparta into Attic wars rather than the Peloponnesian War. Or have I slightly misread your titles?
Right. Well, at the time, Thucydides does not call it the Peloponnesian War. He does not take an ethnocentric view. He calls it the war between the Peloponnesians and the Athenians. It is not until, well, we can't really be sure, but we don't have evidence until the 1st century BC with Strabo and so forth that it is called the Peloponnesian War. And my view, in Thucydides, there is one passage where the Peloponnesians refer to it as the Attic War. So I have picked up on that. And Thucydides thinks of the war as beginning in 432, 431, and stretching down to 404. I see it as an enduring strategic rivalry that begins in 465. And there are 3 episodes of armed conflict, which I call the First Attic War, the Second Attic War, and the Third Attic War. And my book on the Third Attic War was released in the United States today. In between, there is, of course, the Sicilian Expedition. And since I'm looking at things from the perspective of Sparta, I refer to that as Sparta's Sicilian proxy war. Now, Sparta's contribution to this war is one man, a man named Gylippus, son of Cleandridas, whom they send out at the urging of an Athenian with a Spartan name, Alcibiades, who is in exile from Athens and who comes to Sparta and begins guiding them strategically. And that one man makes all the difference in the world. So the, Sparta's contribution may seem small, but it is of very great magnitude.
Yes, it's hugely important. And you've mentioned Alcibiades there. He is this, I mean, he's a interesting character, certainly, and divides opinion even today. But I was just thinking as you were describing Athens, we haven't spent much time discussing Gylippus. He's a fascinating character if
Oh,
you look at his backstory. But Alcibiades almost epitomizes this Athenian sort of
right.
flair and
I
chutzpah.
don't think there's anyone in human history like him. I mean, in his youth, he was every man's woman. And in his adulthood, he was every woman's man. Married women came flock to him. He gets
Including the king of
the
Sparta
wife
as well.
of the Spartan king. He gets her pregnant. Tries to put somebody of his own lineage on the Spartan throne. Uh, but think about it. Have you ever had a situation where you had someone dominate the politics of his own political community, be driven into exile, then dominate the politics of the enemy of your own political community, and then briefly dominate the politics of a third country? I mean, the closest I can think of to Alcibiades in history is Bill Clinton, but he doesn't compare. He's a piker. I
Yeah,
mean,
I wasn't thinking of Bill Clinton. I was thinking the closest one could get is maybe Alexander, in that he rises to the top in Macedon and then subsumes the Persian Empire himself.
but he
But
conquers it,
yeah,
as
yes, but
opposed
he's
to seduces it. I mean,
yes, and
it's
becomes the last Achaemenid king.
yes,
But I mean, it still doesn't quite fit because there isn't a third. I don't think.
yeah, it's there are multiple biographies of Alcibiades, starting obviously with Plutarch and Nepos. But there's a number of recent ones that are quite good. I'm trying to think. There's a British author
David
who,
Stuttard,
yes, that's a splendid book. I
Nemesis.
don't
Is it?
think it's right in every particular, but it is appreciative of the subject, and it's often right. And he writes well, which is a great blessing in a time when most people can't write to save their lives.
The decision to go to, and perhaps for the benefit of the listeners, the Sicilian Expedition, for those who aren't aware, and I hope you don't mind me describing the Peloponnesian War here,
That's
just
all
because
right.
it's so ingrained in my
All right.
head that it's
Yes,
going to be
right. It is conventional now.
Yes, I'm very conventional in that regard, so forgive me. But yes, the Sicilian expedition, which begins in 415 BC, that's with sort of 16 years into the Peloponnesian War, where there have been a series. Well, I think you mentioned the first sort of, I guess, which is your second Attic War, the first sort of the Archidamian War, also known as, and I'm
Hmm.
throwing a whole load of names at the listeners here, but from about 431 to 421.
2-1. Yeah, that's correct.
That's the Archidamian War. This is named after the Spartan king, where there seems to be a strategy of containment on behalf of Sparta against Athens, as opposed to what happens after the Sicilian expedition, which is more the ultimate objective of destruction of Athens. Is that right?
Yeah, what I would say is the Spartans are deeply ambivalent. And they're ambivalent for two reasons. They had been allied with Athens against Persia at the time of Xerxes' invasion. And in some regards, the high point of Spartan life is the Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of Salamis, the Battle of Plataea. They look back on that as, glorious, which it surely was. And they were allied with Athens. So there's an emotional side to it. And Pan-Hellenism is a force in Spartan thinking. But there's another reason. The Athenians are used by the Spartans as a kind of shield against a return of the Persians. For logistical reasons, the Persians cannot march into Greece unless they control the sea and can supply their troops with food from the sea. So as long as the Athenians maintain a strong navy and dominate the Aegean, the Persians will not come back. And the Spartans profit from this in a certain sense. After 478, the Spartans conduct a proxy war against Persia using the Athenians and their allies. The problem comes when the growth in Athenian power becomes sufficient that their proxy becomes a threat to Sparta. And so what they want to do is curtail the strength of Athens without eliminating it. However, the way what I call the Second Attic War, which is the Archidamian War, plus the Battle of Mantinea goes, so 431 down to 418, the Spartans find themselves in a situation where Athens presents itself as an existential threat to Sparta in two ways. One, they have a fort in Coryphasium, Pylos, on the coast of Messenia, and the presence of Messenian exiles there could cause a Helot revolt, and they're very nervous about that. The second thing is, in the wake of the so-called Peace of Nicias in 421, there's a breakaway movement from the Spartan alliance within the Peloponnesus. And the Athenians, sparked by the same Alcibiades, who seems to be everywhere in this period, have a coalition that threatens to defeat Sparta at Mantinea, very near Spartan territory, which could also set off a Helot revolt. So the ambivalence wanes as a consequence of Athens presenting itself as an existential threat to Sparta, and the Spartans begin to think, that is to say, a majority of Spartans, begin to think somewhat differently about Athens, about the necessity for eliminating Athens as a power. And along comes the Sicilian Expedition, where the Athenians make themselves vulnerable. And in comes this same Alcibiades, who had been behind the Battle of Mantinea, behind the Sicilian Expedition, when at Athens, driven into exile, goes to Sparta, advises them and charms them into sending Gylippus to Sicily. And he turns the war around. And the Athenians lose not only the initial expedition and pretty much all of the forces and triremes, there is a relief expedition sent out under the command of a figure named Demosthenes. Thus, you get ignorant armies fight by night. You get the battle on Epipolae, which is an inspiration for a British poet later. And they lose the second expedition too. And what it means is they lose hundreds of triremes. They lose the men who row the triremes, 200 per trireme. So we're talking large numbers of human beings. They lose a large hoplite population. And at the end of the Sicilian expedition, the Athenians really do not have a fleet. They have some ships, yes, but can they put out a fleet of 100 triremes? No, not at that time. And they have spent their treasury down, not to nothing, but to very little, which means the money to build triremes and the money to keep triremes on station, there's not much of it there. To build a trireme, it takes about a talent of silver, 57 pounds. To keep a trireme with its crew of 200 on station for a month takes another talent, another 57 pounds. So when you send out 200 triremes, you're talking about real money, tons of silver. And the Athenians are in a pretty desperate situation at that point. So what I call Sparta's Sicilian proxy war is a tremendous victory, not only for the Syracusans, but for the Spartans, because it weakens Athens in a way they'd hardly imagined weakening Athens before.
Hello, Ollie here. Please forgive my interruption, but I wanted to let you know that at Aspects of History, we produce a digital magazine featuring articles, interviews, short stories, and book reviews of the best historical writing available. Authors featured including Ben Macintyre, Lucy Worsley, Andrew Roberts, and plenty more. An annual subscription is available for only $9.99. That's pounds or dollars. Yep, you heard that right. That's 6 issues for under £10 or dollars. Head over to aspectsofhistory.com to subscribe, where you can also gift subscriptions. Now back to the show. It's hard to imagine the Spartans being able to achieve the results by the use of manpower.
No, they can't. They can't do it. I mean, they can put together manpower through the Peloponnesian League and invade Attica.
But it would be costly for themselves, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas they just use one man, Gylippus.
Right. There's virtually no risk involved for the Spartans in this. And technically, throughout most of this period, they remain at peace with Athens. So this is from a perspective of international law, it is a war taking place in time of peace, and the Spartans are surreptitiously, but it's not very surreptitious, supplying help to the Syracusans, just as the Athenians had supplied help to the rogue Spartan allies within the Peloponnesus. Now, in the middle of this, the Athenians actually attack Spartan territory, and technically, you have war again. And in the aftermath of the Sicilian expedition, the Spartans begin to think, maybe we can become amphibious, maybe we can take to the sea, which they could not have done except for the fact that the Persians weighed in with money. And the Persians have been looking for a way to divide the Greeks against one another for a good long time. And the Spartans are now willing to play ball. So Spartans have no money. They literally have no coinage. I mean, it's that far gone. The only city in their alliance that could supply money is Corinth, and Corinth has suffered greatly during both the First Attic War and the Second Attic War. And they're not capable at this stage of putting a major fleet into the water. So this Persian money is absolutely vital. And so you get an alliance between Sparta and Persia against Athens, and the Persians fight a proxy war against the Athenians using the Spartans. So it's a world of proxy wars.
Certainly. And I guess the listeners, I'm sure, if they're thinking what I'm thinking, which is inevitably drawn to current conflict and the war in Ukraine, which is a proxy. And you mentioned in the book, actually. Mm-hmm. But before we kind of delve into that comparison, I was just interested on, you write very much about, as the debate over whether Sparta is going to declare war on Athens back in 431 BC. You have the Athenian delegates mentioning their motivations for expanding the empire is fear, honor, and advantage, I think.
Yes.
And that becomes very important. You write persuasively that this is an important factor that, of course, we see in conflict ever since. And I suppose the Greeks always do things first. We all know that. Right. But including proxy wars, it seems. But do you think that there's this element of realism you write related to this? There's a really fascinating sentence you wrote that is, realism distorts political reality, which is very interesting to me. When you talk about the Sicilian expedition, you can certainly see how advantage is a factor.
Yes, the tribute that the Athenians receive from their subject allies is vitally important for supporting an expanded population that they have. So poor people in Athens can make a living off the empire by rowing in the fleet or by serving on juries or whatever. That income, it becomes vitally important for the Athenians in the period between 477 and the Sicilian expedition. Uh, but the other thing is honor. That's what the realists forget. The realists think in terms of fear, which is perfectly reasonable. And this league was initially set up by the Athenians because of fear of the Persians. Uh, and the realists will acknowledge advantage as a motive. Honor they shy away from. But if you're asking why did the Athenians row 800 nautical miles? Think about rowing 800 miles. There are a lot of people in Britain that know something about rowing, but rowing 800 nautical miles, even with the help of a sail, a kind of square sail that sometimes you can deploy because the wind is in your favor, uh, and and trying to project power over that distance. The attraction for the Athenians is how crazy it is. But
So
remember,
the very difficulty of the whole operation is what is so attractive to them.
the grandeur of it. Now, remember, these are the people who were most important in defeating the Persians at Salamis. And the resistance of the Greeks to Xerxes' invasion was crazy. I mean, the relative numbers, it's just astonishing. Uh, and in particular, the numbers at sea. Uh, and the Persian Navy had much more experience than the Greek Navy. You know, prior to Salamis, the Athenians had fought one naval battle of any significance. That was a few days before at Artemisium. Uh, so it is this love of honor that allows them to be victorious in the Persian wars. Think of the Battle of Marathon to move from the sea to the land. They're badly outnumbered at Marathon, and they outwit the Persians and win. So they're very full of themselves, and they have some reason to be full of themselves. The achievement is breathtaking. And the current generation, when you get down to 415, this is in some sense their attempt to do what their ancestors had done at Salamis. Now, the way Thucydides presents it is the Athenians are the Persians. They are invading Syracuse with an armada, just as Xerxes invaded Greece with an armada. So from the Syracusan point of view, this is at least the point of view of some Syracusans, Hermocrates in particular. This is the opportunity for Syracuse to do to Athens what the Athenians and Spartans had done to the Persians. It's so honor is extremely important in these to understanding this, and it is the realists, the sort of academic school of realists, avert their gaze from questions of honor, from questions of religion, from questions of political regime. I think they're essential for understanding all of this. So in an appendix to Sparta's Sicilian proxy war, I argue against them. And by the way, I have the same opinion of Wilsonian idealists. Well, they think, for example, that you can tame Russia by bringing them into the commercial world, that you can tame China by making them wealthy and bringing them into the commercial world. That's to ignore, in the case of China, uh, thousands of years of history and the kind of the impulse of Chinese civilization, the Central Kingdom. And of course, it is to ignore the Russian experience of expansion, going back to the 17th and 18th centuries and extending right on into the 20th century. This is what's going on in Ukraine is nothing new.
But it seems as though China, in particular, and actually, of course, with Russia and the Putin's view of history, but China's view of history seems like so directed by their view of how they were treated in the 19th century by certainly the British Empire. And that, I mean, I don't know if you've seen pictures of President Xi meeting Keir Starmer today, but there's this sort of very much the roles are reversed. It's a look of disdain almost when he meets Starmer.
Yeah, I of course. And look, consider the way he treated Obama in Copenhagen. He didn't show up for a meeting, stood him up. I mean, if you don't think that's deliberate, you're not thinking. It's no, there's a kind of sense of honor, of grandeur, of greatness. This was once true of the Germans too. Think what it took to change the course of German culture, of German political culture. It took horrors. So it seems to me that the post Cold War policy of the United States and Europe was pretty much insane.
Yes.
Yeah, we ignored, we averted our gaze from Russian history, from Chinese history, from the cultural character of Russia, the cultural character of China. And the realists do this. So they will tell you, the taking Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, NATO expansion was perceived by the Russians as a threat, as if the French were going to invade Russia, or the Germans were going to come back and invade Russia again. No one has any claim on Russian territory. So except the Chinese. And I don't know if you followed this, but in sometime in the last couple of weeks, the Chinese published maps of China.
No, I didn't see this. No.
Well, the map of China they published includes Russian territory. And the Chinese are dedicated to overthrowing the unequal treaties of the 19th and 20th centuries. Well, one of those unequal treaties awards Siberia to Russia. And there was a war between Russia and China on that border in 1969, an undeclared war, but a big war involving tank battles and so forth. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of fear, the Russians have no one to fear except the Chinese. If you're looking at it from the perspective of honor and grandeur, Europe is where they want to go. And so all their neighbors are nervous. Whoever would have imagined Sweden would join NATO? Finland would join NATO. Well, there's a reason they've joined NATO. They understand what the realists don't understand about Russia. And they understand what the Wilsonian idealists forgot about Russia. But, if you come back to ancient Greece, the Spartans want to be left alone. They're a saturated power. It's a phrase Bismarck used. They've got everything they need. They are all gentlemen. They rule over a servile population that outnumbers them maybe 7-1. They need defense, and they're always thinking in terms of defense, and that's why they have formed the Peloponnesian League, to enable them to keep what they have. The Athenians want more and more and more.
We're going to leave it there until Wednesday, when Paul and I discuss contemporary events and how various global powers deal with the challenges they have and why they should look to ancient history and the Peloponnesian War for guidance. Thanks for listening. Please do share with friends, like, subscribe and follow, and by all means get in touch via Spotify comments or email history@aspectsofhistory.com. But until Wednesday, thank you and good night.